Good day to each and everyone. I am Mohammad Hashim Lumna, and together with Mohammad Yakhya osop, we will be reporting the obligations of the VENDEE, which is the Article 1582. So medyo madali lang to dahil yung mga nakita mo sa obligations of the vendor ay may encounter mo din dito sa obligations of the VENDEE. Article 1552 states that the vendee is bound to accept delivery and to pay the price of the thing sold at the time and place stipulated in the contract. So, simply put, there are two obligations of the vendee. That is, first, to accept the delivery of the thing sold, and second, to pay the price of the thing sold. Now, what if walang stipulation as to the time and place? So, under Article 1582, second paragraph, if the time and place should not have been stipulated, the payment must be made at the time and place of the delivery of the things sold. So, meaning kung saan at kung kailan i-deliver yung things sold, doon mo din dapat bayaran. So, parang yung cash on delivery na option of payment. Now, we also have to consider Article 1524. In relation to Article 1582. Now, Article 1524 states that the vendor shall not be bound to deliver the things sold if the vendee has not paid him the price, if no period for the payment has been fixed in the contract. So, as a general rule daw, wala daw obligasyon si vendor to deliver the things sold unless nabayaran na ni vendee yung thing sold. And kailan yan? If no period for the payment has been fixed in the contract. So, if merong time for such payment na na-fixed in the contract, the vendee is required to pay even before the thing is delivered to him. Now, if yung time of delivery lang yung nakalagay sa contract, kailangan ni vendee to pay even before the thing is delivered to him. Now, we can also apply yung natutunan natin sa obligations and contract because we have to consider that the setting of the time of delivery and payment is as if we are setting a period. And remember, when the parties establishes a period, it is assumed or presumed that it is for the benefit of both parties, meaning the creditor and the debtor. So, pareho lang dito sa obligations of the vendee and the vendor. So now let us move on to the acceptance of the delivery. So as a general rule, the buyer of the goods is not bound to accept delivery rather by installment. So hindi daw natin pwedeng i-compel si buyer to accept delivery by installments. So kagaya ng creditor at debtor relationship, hindi rin natin pwedeng i-compel si creditor to accept payment of the debt by installment if walang nakasama. Now, there is always an exception to the general rule. So, ang exception dito is when the parties otherwise stipulated yung contract nila to accept ni buyer yung delivery by installments. So, breach of contract is when separate price has been fixed for each installment. So, if the breach affects the whole contract, yung injured party daw ay pwedeng mag-sue for damages for breach of the entire contract if the breach is so material as to affect the contract as a whole. Now, if the breach is severable naman or if only a particular part of the contract has been breached, pwedeng mag-claim yung injured party ng compensation for such breach. Now, simply put, dito sa breach affects the whole contract, dapat substantial yung breach. Now, if severable naman yung breach or it can be separated from the whole contract, again, the injured party may claim for compensation. Now, let us move on to the right to examine the goods. So, as a general rule, the buyer has the right to examine the goods before accepting them. So, pwede daw i-examine muna ni buyer yung goods before niya i-accept ito. So, exception to the general rule when the parties stipulated otherwise. So, if napagkasunduan nila. And number two, when the goods are delivered, collect on the delivery. So, there is also an exception to the exception. So, that is when there is an arrangement or usage of trade permitting such examination. Now, when can we say that there is an acceptance by the buyer of the thing delivered? So, that is through express acceptance, meaning he expressly accepted the thing delivered. And number two, through implied acceptance. So, that is when the buyer does an act which only an owner can do. And when the buyer retains the goods after the lapse of a reasonable time without intimating to the seller that he or she has rejected them. So, sa implied acceptance daw, if may ginawa si buyer which an owner can do. And number two, if within a reasonable time, hinold niya yung thing delivered without telling the seller na gi-reject niya ito or hindi niya to tatanggapin. So what is the effect of acceptance? So as a general rule, the seller is not discharged from liability in damages or other remedy for breach of warranty by the acceptance of the goods. So exception to the general rule, number one, when the parties otherwise stipulate. And number two, when the buyer fails to give notice to the seller of any breach of warranty within a reasonable time after the buyer knows or ought to know of such breach. So exception, when the parties daw agreed na i-waive yung uh, warranty. And number two, when the buyer fails to give notice to the seller of any breach of warranty. So, he failed to give notice sa seller na na-breach na yung warranty within a reasonable time. Now, let us move on to the refusal to accept delivery. So, if justified, the buyer has no duty to return the goods to the seller unless otherwise agreed by the parties, and the title over the goods will not pass on the buyer. The buyer will not be obliged to pay the price, and if the buyer constitutes himself or herself as a depository, he will be liable as such. Now, yan yung mga uh, conditions if justified yung pag-refuse ng buyer ng delivered na thing.
So good morning everyone. I am Mohammad Yakhya P. osop along with Mohammad Hashim Lumna. We're assigned with chapter 5 and I am assigned with the article 1588 up to 1593. So let's go with article 1588. It says here that if there is no stipulation as specified in the first paragraph of 1523, when the buyer's refusal to accept the goods is without just cause, the title thereto passes to him from the moment they are placed at his disposal. Now, we should remember that on the article 1587, it is tackled earlier by my group. It is the refusal to accept the delivery is with a right so to do. But under this article, the buyer's refusal to accept the goods is without just cause. So therefore, when the buyer's refusal to accept the goods is without just cause, the title thereto passes to him from the moment they are placed at his disposal. And also the article 1504 will also be applicable when the title passes to the buyer, and therefore the risk of loss is borne by the vendee or the buyer from the moment they are placed at his disposal. So that is only on the article 1588. If without just cause, thereto the title passes to the vendee from the moment they are placed at his disposal. So the next article is 1589, which says which is the liability of vendee for interest for payment made after delivery. So the vendee shall owe interest for the period between the delivery of the thing and the payment of the price in the following cases. First case is, should it have been so stipulated? Second is, should the thing sold and delivered produce fruits or income? And third is, should he be in default from the time of judicial or extrajudicial demand for the payment of the price? So to uh, to go with it deeper, uh, liability of vendee for interest where payment made after the delivery. This article presupposes that that the delivery of the thing sold and the payment of the price were not made simultaneously, but the thing sold was delivered first, followed by the payment of the price after the lapse of a certain period of time. The vendee, therefore, is liable to pay interest from the delivery of the thing until the payment of the price. So the first one is, the interest is expressly stipulated. So the rate stipulated, in such cases, the rate stipulated governs. The stipulated of the party to pay interest may be oral also, because the Article 1956 of the Civil Code is unapplicable, which says that no interest shall be due unless it has been expressly stipulated in writing, and that article should be construed as applicable only to contract of loans. Therefore, it will not be applicable to this article. Next one is the fruits or income received by vendee from things sold. Under this case, two conditions must exist. The first is the thing sold has been delivered, and the second one is that it produces fruits or income. If the vendee would not be bound to pay interest for the use of the money which he should have been paid, the principle of bilaterality which characterizes a contract of sale would no longer exist. Third one is, the vendee is guilty of default. So in this case, if the vendee incurs in delay in the payment of the agreed price, the interest is due from the time of judicial or extrajudicial demand by the vendor for the payment of the price. This demand by the vendor is the starting point for the commencement of default or delay on the part of the vendee. So under this case, no demand is necessary. So the fourth, which is in the installment, partial payment made of purchase price. It says here that the Article 1589 applies to a situation where the seller delivers the thing to the buyer who makes partial payment of the purchase price. Thus, payment of the balance of the purchase price will not obligate the buyer to pay interest if none of the three cases mentioned above in Article 1589 applies. So that is only under Article 1590. So the next is Article 1589 pala. So the next is Article 1590. Should the vendee be when vendee can and cannot suspend payment. So should the vendee be disturbed in the possession of ownership of the thing acquired, or should he have reasonable grounds to fear such disturbance by a vindicatory action or a foreclosure of mortgage, he may actually suspend payment of price until the vendor has caused the disturbance or danger to cease, unless the latter gives security for the return of the price in a proper case, or it has been stipulated that notwithstanding any such contingency, the vendee or the buyer shall be bound to make the payment. A mere act of trespass shall not authorize the suspension of the payment of the price. So to classify this, when does the vendee can or cannot suspend payment? It is this: when vendee can suspend payment under this article, may suspend the payment of price in two cases only: if he is disturbed in the possession of or ownership of the thing bought, just as I've said earlier, or if he has well-grounded fear that his possession or ownership would be disturbed by a vindicatory action or foreclosure of mortgage. Uh, Under the provision of Article 1590, the vendee has no cause of action for rescission before final judgment. The reason being that otherwise the vendor might become the victim of collusion. So when does the vendee cannot suspend payment? In the following cases, the vendee cannot suspend the payment of the price even if there is disturbance in his possession of or ownership of the thing sold. First is if the vendor gives security for the return of the price in a proper case. The second is if it has been stipulated that notwithstanding any such contingency, the vendee must make payment, or the Article 1548, Part 3. Third is if the vendor has caused the disturbance or danger to cease. Fourth is if the disturbance is a mere act of trespass. And last one, if the vendee has fully paid the price. There is a mere act of trespass when the third person claims no right whatever. The vendor is not liable. Therefore, the vendee has a direct action against the intruder. So the next article is Article 1591, which tackles when does the vendor may resign sale of immovable property. So, should the vendor have reasonable grounds to fear the loss of immovable property sold and its price, he may immediately sue for the rescission of the sale. Should such ground not exist, the provision of Article 1191 shall be observed. So when vendor may resign sale of property, this article refers only to a sale of real property, where the vendor has good reasons to fear the loss of the property and its price. It contemplates a situation where there has been a delivery of the immovable property, but the vendee has not yet paid the price. So if the vendee has not yet paid the price, but the subject matter of the sale is going to perish, because of one reason is that demanding payments from the vendee is actually useless and the vendee has shown signs of irresponsibility, then in these cases the only remedy is the rescission of the contract. So Article 1591 is applicable to another point is that Article 1591 is applicable to both cash sales and sales in installment. So the next article is the Article 1592, which tackles where automatic rescission of rescission of sale of immovable property stipulated. So in the sale of immovable property, even though it may have been stipulated that upon failure to pay the price at the time agreed upon, the rescission of the contract shall of right take place, the vendee may pay even after the expiration of the period, as long as no demand for rescission of the contract has been made upon him, either judicially or by a notarial act. After the demand, however, the court may not grant him a new term. So the right, as a general rule, the vendor may sue for rescission of the contract should the vendee fail to pay the agreed price. But on the sale of real property, it is subject to the stipulation agreed upon the parties and to the provision of Article 1592 of this article, which contemplates sales of immovable property with a stipulation that failure to pay the price at the time agreed upon will cause the rescission of the contract. Indeed, before a demand for rescission of the contract, uh, demand for rescission of the contract, not the demand for the payment of the price, has been made by the vendor, either judicially or by notarial act, the vendee may still pay the price even even after the expiration of the stipulated period for payment, and notwithstanding a stipulation that a failure to pay the price on the stipulated date ipso facto resolves the sale. There is actually no existing provision in our laws authorizing the automatic rescission of contracts for non-payment of the purchase price. So another point on this article is the right to resign is actually not absolute. The right to resign is not absolute and the court may extend the period for payment. Once a demand, however, for rescission by suit or notarial act is made under Article 1592, the court, as I've said earlier, the court may not grant the vendee a new period. Another point on this article is when this Article 1592 does not apply, is not applicable to all matters. Uh, Article 1592 is actually does not actually apply to sales on installment of real property in which the parties have laid down the procedure to be followed in the event the vendee failed to fulfill his obligation, and to a mere promise to sell where the title remains with the vendor until full payment of the price. In other words, the vendee in such cases may no longer pay the price after the expiration of the time agreed upon, although no demand has yet been made upon him by suit or notarial act. So the last article, which is the Article 1593, with respect to movable property, which with the Article 1593, which tackles the automatic rescission of sale of movable property stipulated. It says here, with respect to movable property, the rescission of the sale shall of right take place in the interest of the vendor. If the vendee, upon the expiration of the period fixed for the delivery of the thing, should not have appeared to receive it, or having appeared, he should not have tendered the price at the same time unless a longer period has been stipulated for its payment. So the uh the point on this article is in the sale of real property, the vendor must make a demand for rescission before he can have the right to resign the contract, as I've said earlier on the Article 1592. But in the case of personal property, the movable property, which has not yet been delivered to the vendor can actually resign the contract as a matter of right if the vendee, without any valid cause, does not first is does not accept delivery. Second is does not pay the price unless a credit period for its payment has been stipulated. So the mere failure of the vendee to comply with the terms of the contract, however, does not resign the same. It is necessary that the vendor should take some affirmative action indicating his intention to resign. So that I think that's all, and thank you.